Hello, everyone. I wanted to kind of post an update. I got done teaching my class earlier today, and there was some information that I realized that I didn't get to go over in the class that I taught. When I get the recording, and I'm planning on sharing that here on my channel, and I want to make sure that I have the rest of the information out to share with everybody else. Um, what was sort of missed towards the end for the sake of time, because it was an hour-long class and probably would have gone over 10 minutes further than it needed to, is I was going over dolls from ancient time frame all the way through the Elizabethan era and into post-period. And the part that I didn't really get to go over with is that fashion dolls were more commonly used in post-period, so we're talking post-1600, and we're not restricted to just the affluent. Most of the time, the references that I happen to find were normally people of high noble or royal status that seem to have the money to be able to have these dolls created at such a very detailed level. With the advances in techniques and technology, it was easier to produce certain items in larger quantities. So manufacturing started to kind of come in. We weren't quite the industrial revolution at this point because that was still a while off. But it did make a difference um, as far as the availability of who could have these dolls. Different kinds of makers arose in this time frame. You had what they call the mantua maker, who was a seamstress who specialized in women's clothing and fashions. And there were figurines and dolls sellers in post period that we have in woodcut depictions, which is in the slideshow, which you will at least see in the end of the video. Fashion dolls became larger in size post period, so the 14 to 16 inch, 18-inch range was a little more common than it would have been pre 1600. They do seem to be mainly the wood carved with cloth detail over top becomes a lot more common. And the metal, like metal dolls, you're seeing less of fashion figurines and more of that becoming toy soldiers and different kinds of use for those metal figurines. The rising of the merchant class was also able to take advantage of having clothing made with the aid of fashion dolls. So they're right there with the merchant class being able to access something that they couldn't have before. The height of usage of fashion dolls and their purposes seemed to be in the 18th century, as dolls would be rented and sent to mantua makers, seamstresses, or tailors for the making of fashionable clothing. I don't see dolls of folks, people of color, um, doll depictions until about the 18th century. Um, I've run into, with doing a little bit of research, I've run into figurines that were made, but normally it's a depiction of a saint that normally had dark skin, and mostly those were male. I wasn't running into really any female depictions. More so, if I do find them, they're a portrait of a enslaved woman situation from that time frame, pre 1600. Fashion dolls in general seem to have a range of clothing that was removable to make a wider wardrobe as compared to time in the past. So we see that the clothing isn't just made for the doll and that they have one set of clothes. You actually are getting multiple sets that you can change on and off in the 18th century. Um, they're a bit more versatile as compared to the older versions of dolls that were made with covered wire. With the wooden ones, you had a bit more form and shape to be able to make clothes of an appropriate size and fit. And then with fashion dolls, they go well into the 19th century and are still used today. That's what Barbie is. Barbie is a fashion doll. But one of the main items I didn't get to go over that's really fascinating is inventories. Inventories are a fantastic account of materials owned by an affluent person in the past. And as having an inventory was not cheap to take an account of one's material wealth gained over your life. The records are housed and kept in careful condition, and I came across a research paper by Edinburgh Castle Research on the dolls of Mary Queen of Scots. And this was a couple of years ago, and I still use this research regularly. In the research, the author, Michael Pierce, details a total of 19 fashion dolls, their clothing, accessories, and a miniature bed and toy litter. This account is not including theatrical puppets, which she also had in her inventory, which were used for court amusements brought from France and used while in Scotland. The paper also mentions Elizabeth Valois, Queen of Spain, daughter of Catherine de' Medici, who had several fashion dolls in her possession. Her mother, Catherine de' Medici, had about 14 dolls when she passed in 1589. Other notable mentions for dolls in inventories are Henry VIII, who had a puppet, and 4 dolls with female gowns, used for ordering clothes for his wives. Lastly, his daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, had fashion dolls as well, resulting from multiple marriage negotiations, which are well documented, and as they were noted also in this research about these dolls being sent and received, written in letters to and from Queen Elizabeth. Although they're not mentioned in her inventory as written by Janet Arnold, there is a section that talks about fashion dolls, but it doesn't have any accounting as to how many she had, if they were made out of certain materials, or anything else of this nature. It just didn't get in the information. But this snippet of information unfortunately did not get in my class, and I really wanted to share that with everybody, because if you do happen to do some research on Google, you can find the Edinburgh Castle Research, The Dolls of Mary Queen of Scots by Michael Pierce. It's a fantastic research paper, and it accounts and shows what French fashion looked like, and it goes over in detail in the original French the inventory itself, and also goes into detail about the inventory. He really breaks it down. So if you do get an opportunity to check out that research paper, I highly recommend it. They also made replica versions of the fashion dolls in that research paper, and they're beautiful. That's really how I'd like my dolls to turn out, and I'm well on my way. The ones that I have made, they've really turned out nice, and practice makes perfect. So let's see here. One of the images that I didn't get to go over too much was I found a woodcut image of a figurine or toy seller in a tented stall. And there was also one that I happened to find on the internet, an image of a figurine seller from an altarpiece, but the image I found was very grainy, so it really wasn't able to be added into the slideshow that I created for my class. Now, the image of the seller, doll toy seller, who had the tented stall, was an image that looks to be about 1630 to 1650 Delft. So we're talking in the Netherlands there. Now, that's just basing it on the clothing, especially on the mother's outfit and her very detailed, elaborate bobbin lace decorated headdress. Just looking at it, that really kind of set the tone for where it was from. Now, in that image, on the table in the tented stall, there's a plethora of dolls, varying sizes, varying decorations for sale right in the center front. Although there are other toys too, there happens to be on the left some stick ponies, which we also see in Children at Play by Peter Bruegel from the 1560s or so. his image of children at play really shows all the different kinds of games that people knew pre-1600. In that same image of the toy seller, there was also toy drums hanging on the edge of the tent. And this was taken from a Dutch book of simple wisdom. The inscription that was on the page with the image didn't seem to really be related to what was going on in the image. It was more like an unrelated fable. And the last image that I had was from a family group painting from 1655 by Michael Nouts, also of Delft in the Netherlands. The group portrait shows a family of 6 sitting around a table, more like the Vermeer style of portraiture. The artist happened to caption a real moment in time with his image. And unlike past portraits, the doll is much more closer in the time frame for its clothing, as in prior depictions. Many of the images that I show in my class, the depictions of the doll clothing is normally 20, 30 years earlier than the date of the painting. So that seems to be a common theme with most of the paintings, 1500 through 1600. Let's see here. So this particular image with the family group, the doll definitely looks like a little pilgrim doll, or what we would consider today to be a pilgrim doll, with the wider collar and wider cuffs that are just linen with no real lace decoration. And when we look at the fashion doll itself, it does have a touch of the Dutch Golden Age in its clothing with the wider collar and cuffs, although no lace on it. Now that portrait image was in the National Gallery in London, England. And the best way that I kind of wanted to finish up my class, but kind of got cut a little short, was that dolls continued in popularity and many were sent to the New World, showing the changing fashion details every few months. Most of these dolls or models had wooden bodies and could be of varying sizes. Some were large-scale models to be taken to a tailor to have the newest fashion in clothing made, and were normally in the size of a quarter or half scale as compared to the overall length of the human body. Other scales were 1/6 scale or smaller, so that's about 12 inches. A quarter would be, let's see, quarter would be like 24 inches, half scale would be about 36 inches. And those 1/6 scale and smaller dolls more conveyed a similar fashion message, but more in tactile textures and less in exacting scale. So the tailor or seamstress could get an idea of the clothing with the smaller size dolls. Many fashion dolls came from France and were a noted export. So you can find those on listings from shipwreck records, actually, post period. Especially popular in the 18th century Europe and America, notable extra changes of clothing for dolls and accessories began to appear. The eventual transition into the more modernly conceived play item with all the accessories, kind of like what we think of as Barbie. This is sort of the precursor, well, a long precursor to that. And fashion dolls continue onward into history, making their very tiny mark on a large world. So I just wanted to share those little tidbits with you now that I'm sort of not under the gun for time, because I timed out all of my commentary and it said 50 minutes, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And I had a lot of slides on my class presentation, but I look forward to putting that on the channel here for you within the next week or so. I also wanted to give a shout out to my 5 new subscribers. I haven't been looking at the total It's not normally something that I keep track of, but there was a whole bunch of you that popped on and subscribed most recently, and I really wanted to just say thank you so much for subscribing, taking an interest in my work and videos. It really means a lot. Let's see here. So we are currently up to 57. We got a new one today. Thank you, thank you. My gosh, this is awesome. So keep an eye out here on the channel. The class, as long as everything goes well with the edits and such, the class will be available, I hope, within the next week and a half, depending on when I get a hold of it. And in my class, I am wearing my Renaissance clothing, so you get to kind of see that at the very beginning of the class. But most of the rest of it is a slideshow, so keep in mind that you'll be going through all the images that I've compiled over a 10-year period. But thank you so much. Have a good night. Come in.